This is Omar Nashashibi in Washington, D.C. On Friday, May 31st, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, issued a statement announcing it was suspending multiple customs brokers for posing, quote, an unacceptable compliance risk for de minimis shipments entering the United States. The action is important to companies importing products valued at $800 or less brought into the U.S. under the Entry Type 86 test, a CBP pilot program allowing for the electronic processing of certain products under the de minimis threshold. CBP's action addressing some de minimis shipments is part of an increasing trend here in Washington, D.C., as even lawmakers on Capitol Hill seek to potentially lower the threshold possibly to $200 in an effort to address abuse in the system. Regulators and policymakers on Capitol Hill are concerned over reports of an increased use of the de minimis process by Chinese companies seeking to avoid paying the tariffs of 25% and 7.5% on their imports by breaking up the shipments into smaller batches that would reduce the valuation below that $800 or lower limit. In addition to tariff evasion, there are allegations of imports under the de minimis of fentanyl, of products manufactured using forced labor, and other illicit goods entering the U.S. through the program, which receives less scrutiny than higher-valued imports. Under the Entry Type 86 test, importers use an electronic method to bring products into the United States without paying a duty or a tariff if the goods do not exceed $800 on a given day. In its May 31st statement, the agency said that, quote, CBP's evaluation and suspension of non-compliant Entry Type 86 test participants is part of a multi-layered enforcement approach to prevent abuse of the de minimis process, protect the integrity of the supply chain, and ensure that businesses comply with applicable U.S. legal requirements, end quote. The statement went on to say that, quote, any broker that has been suspended will be considered for reinstatement if it demonstrates to CBP that it has developed and implemented a remedial action plan. But the issue of importance here is not the suspension of those customs brokers themselves, but that CBP is responding for calls for action, both from Capitol Hill and from other outside groups. Though, however, some of these outside groups say the suspension of those customs brokers is not enough and actually calling on the Biden administration to use executive action to end the Entry Type 86 test under the de minimis entirely. This follows legislation clearing the House of Representatives in April that would bar most products from China being able to be eligible for entry under the de minimis, citing 60% of imports under that program originating from China. That action in April of this year was the House Ways and Means Committee, the Tax and Trade Writing Committee over on the House side. They cleared that bill. What we are hearing is potentially for the whole House to take it up. That might occur potentially later in the year after a lame duck session, depending on the outcome of the November elections. But clearly, based on this action, CBP is increasing its scrutiny of imports entering the U.S. under the de minimis threshold, and companies using the Entry Type 86 process should remain vigilant and speak with their customs broker to be sure that company is in full compliance. Sources here in our trade circles in Washington, D.C. do believe that the latest steps taken by the CBP are just a precursor of further tightening of the de minimis entry process if the agency believes that importers are continuing to abuse the system. You should make sure that you and your customs broker are conducting your due diligence on suppliers for goods entering under the $800 or less de minimis threshold. We last provided an update on de minimis in last December of 2023, and we may do so again towards the end of this year if Congress does in fact move on trade bill that would lower the exemption threshold from that current $800 or less, which would occur in that lame duck session. In the interim, though, please do reach out to CLA for more information on this issue or other related trade policy coming from Washington, D.C.